Hey everyone, so I'm not feeling really all that great today, but I had wanted to make this video and this was my plan, and so we're going to give her a go and hopefully it will work out. I wanted to make this video today to talk about how I maintain my good mental health today. And just to give you a snippet of my background, I really started struggling with depression around 10. I was eventually diagnosed at 14, and they said at the time that I was at least met the criteria for clinical depression 2 years prior to that. So I really struggled with life sucking and feeling hurt and sad, and my mental health comes from trauma. And I started remembering the trauma at 10, and I didn't tell anybody for like 4 years, but I struggled with it. Sorry. So I struggled with it for a long time, and the cycle it's never ending. It just repeats itself over and over and over again. The terrible self-worth and shame I felt as I was remembering the trauma and experiencing the trauma. And to be honest, when I first started to remember the trauma, I was pretty messed up. I was 10 years old, and so I think around that time you're just starting to go through the beginning stages of puberty, and you start to recognize boys, and you understand things are changing on the body, and you understand that there's this sex thing. You don't know much about it, but you know it exists, right? And so then I started to remember the trauma, and it's not like it comes to you in this clear memory one day and you're like, well, hey, that's very clear, that makes sense. It comes back in bits and pieces and flashes, and for me, a lot of sensory things, smells, sounds. My body physically would feel sick. There'll always be interruptions, I apologize. So, and one of the other ways, I talked about how it comes in flashes and waves, and there was that sensory piece for me, was a huge part of it. But it came in, for the most part, in nightmares. And I had nightmares for years. I had nightmares all the time when I was 10. Not for years. It felt like years. But I had nightmares all the time. And to the point where my sister snuck in and slept in my bed every night. And it was because I was afraid to sleep alone. So she won't. Anyways, big long story. That's how it came back to me. And so as it's coming back to you, you wake up with first there's no memory. You just know that you had nightmares. You don't know why. You wake up in the night scared and sweaty and terrified, and you can't remember why. So as this progressed for me, I started getting flashes or snippets of what my nightmares were about. And for me, this was involving, first of all, I started to think I was a pervert, because I was having dreams where there was sexual things happening with people that I shared some kind of relation to. So now there's this component of oh my God, am I having fantasies about these people because it's morally wrong? And what are fantasies? Because you don't know. Like, you start to be interested in a boy, but you don't, at that age, I wasn't. So it was just the beginning of. So to be having these like sexualized dreams, I thought something was wrong with me. I thought I was a nutcase. I thought, you are this sicko. And I struggled with that for some time, quietly to myself, because I didn't know how do you go to your parents and tell them this, right? Like, how do you do that? And I just didn't know how, so I didn't. Anyways, my whole point of the matter is that the way I remembered and how things started for me really shaped how I progressed in mental illness until I started to go into recovery and then slowly shift it back. So, anyways, I dealt with all those feelings and all that stuff, and other things happened and what have you. And as puberty happens, and as you continue down this road and things change in your body and your mind frame changes, you start to struggle with, okay, this has obviously happened, and I can recognize it for what it was, because I understand logically now that I was a child in these, what are essentially flashbacks in nightmares. But so suddenly you feel this shame, and you feel this sadness because this has happened to you and you can't change it, and you don't know why it happened to you, and it's impacting your life in a negative way. And so you're sad, and you're angry, but you don't know how to be angry or how to express that anger, or at least I didn't. And probably the most important thing that I wish I could change is I struggled with all this alone for a long time, with these feelings and these thoughts and how they morphed, and the shame. And then when dating and stuff came, I never felt like the good guys, or like that I was worthy enough for these good guys or what have you, because there was something broken with me. There was something wrong. There was something dirty or shameful. This had happened to me. So those feelings constantly wear you down, and the depression became so much, and then the anxiety, the fear of, what if somebody finds out? What if somebody knows? What if people see you for what you must really be? What if somebody hurts you again? What if, it's just anxiety. Like, something bad can happen, because if this can happen in my life and it be so real and happen at such a young age, I know, because I have lived through something terrible, that terrible things are much more of a reality. And as I think kids have that innocence of growing up, of not really fully comprehending. You take that kind of for granted, because unless something bad happens to you, it's easy to be like, oh, it happens, but not to me. As a kid, it really is. But when you've experienced it, you start looking for it. And so that's where the anxiety came, and then the panic attacks. And I would not wish a panic attack on my absolute worst nightmare, or worst enemy, which I don't think I really have, but I wouldn't. I 100% wouldn't. And if you've never had one, the only thing I can say to you is it feels like you were dying. It comes out of nowhere, and it grips you so hard that you are paralyzed in this fear that something bad is happening or you are dying. I remember feeling like people were chasing me and was like running through town because suddenly I would go into a panic attack, and I truly, honestly, 100% believe somebody was chasing me and trying to kill me. It's horrendous. Anyways, so, and for those of you that are watching this that have been through it, God bless you. You are so much stronger than you know. So anyways, I sat in yuck for a long time. I used alcohol and drugs to cope. I started doing that early on. I started disassociating because it's so much easier for me to leave my body than be present, to deal with the intenseness of the feelings. I sought services and was connected to doctors and had some hospitalizations, along with some suicide attempts, and nothing ever really clicked for me early on. And it wasn't until after I had my son and I was staying at the women's shelter here in town, that one of the counselors challenged me, because I'm not, I don't know. Anyways, she challenged me and told me that I could not love my son until I learned to love myself. I couldn't truly love my son until I learned to love myself. And that is when I started my journey of recovery, as I call it. And I started to work on the trauma, and I've worked on my symptoms of mental illness, which everybody experiences on different levels. Don't get me wrong. We all need coping strategies on how to deal with and manage these symptoms. Some of us feel them way more intensely than others, and I fall into that category. So over time with counseling, I would say probably like a good almost 10 years into my journey to become well, which started when my son was a baby, so 19 years ago. Anyways, I started actively, not fully, not the whole 10 years, because there were times where I was like, oh, I'm done, shut it down, we are just going to go off the rails for the next 6 months and like coast through because I'm not doing any more work. Had lots of those moments over that time. But about 9 or 10 years into it, so about 8 or 9 years ago, I started seeking an answer because I started to deal with my addiction, which caused me to look. The rooms of recovery in addiction are talk a lot about God and talk a lot about you having to have a higher power, which they choose to refer to as God. When I went in, I was pissing mad. I wanted no part of this God that I had been told about growing up, and this God that would allow something like this happen and all the other things that have happened in my life from that snowball that started all those years ago. And I was pissed. But I went on a journey there, and I found my own spirituality, and I found that through different resources. Sylvia Browne was a huge resource for me. The learning to turn my power over to the universe as opposed to God. Having the universe, believing in the power of energy, and that there's some mystical force that I choose to refer to as God today, of my understanding. Anyways, that journey led me to discover the law of attraction, as it's so called, about how like attracts like. And when I heard that, it made sense for me. Like, so if I think positively, then I'm attracting more positive things in my life. It sounded like it made sense from like an energy, from like a slightly scientific view, that hey, this kind of sounds like maybe this makes sense, and I have nothing to lose, and so I tried it. And I discovered the power of gratitude, because the easiest way to turn negative thoughts into positive is to find something to be grateful for in any situation. And it was really hard in the beginning. And you would say, today you could say, start listing off some stuff you're grateful for. And I could probably list you off 20 things right off the top of my head just looking around, because I can see life that way today. Back then, it was like, okay, well, I'm grateful for my kids. I don't really have anything else for you. So it took time, and it was this huge process, and I'll probably talk a little bit more in depth of that in other videos, because I don't want to run this video way too long. I started to practice gratitude, and I started to get up every morning, and I love a challenge. So on my way to work in the morning, and I worked for minimum wage at Tim Hortons. I loved my job and my coworkers. But I had to get up and be at work for 5 every morning, and had to walk there, and it was not ideal. But I challenged myself to leave the house and see how far I could walk every day with creating a list of gratitude. I'm going to tell you, there were days that I didn't get down to the end of the driveway without my list being done. And then it started to get a little easier as time went on. And the more I practiced, the more it worked. And then I started getting serious and started to try to remember to think positive. And anytime I had a negative thought about something, and I caught that, I would envision this stop sign in my head and be like, stop, and then find something to be grateful for. Easier said than done, I know. But I practiced, and I made it a point to do it. And practicing being positive and being grateful when there wasn't anything that I was complaining about going on made it so much easier to do that stop and think of something positive when I was complaining about something or feeling terrible about something. So I do that every day. Today, every day, I look as often as I can, and when I catch myself, I no longer do the stop sign. I don't have to envision the stop sign anymore, but I catch those thoughts as they start, and I stop and I pull myself out and I say, yeah, but this, because there's always something about the situation. Today I don't feel great, but I'm grateful that I'm not in bed or laying beside my toilet. I'm sick and I don't feel well, but it could be so much worse, and it's not. So I'm grateful that I'm feeling as well as I am. Caught myself starting to go on a tangent, then lost my train of thought once again. So what I can do, practice every day, is gratitude, which helps shift my frame into a more positive thought. And when I'm having negative thoughts, catch myself and shift my focus. It's really helped me to get through some my life is pretty good, but I've had it's life, and life is always going to throw you challenging times and lessons to learn. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. All I can do is live today the best that I can, regardless of the situation. I'm going to have to face loss, which we went through this year, and I'm going to have to, face hard times or discomfort in my marriage or difficulty with my kids. That's all part of life, right? My job, all of us just need to learn to go through life and experience that the best way we can. So I practice gratitude every day, and I try to think as positively as I can. I try to share my positivity with other people, because it's like energy, and I want them to have good energy from me, not bad. and that I hope that me being positive around them influences them to feel a little bit more positive or a little bit better. I'm also honest though. I have bad days. I will never be one of those people that will be like, oh, I never have to be kept in check, or, remember in the back of my head that I struggled with mental illness for a very long time. And it doesn't just go away. Like, I still get anxiety when we have to go to group events, right? I still enter a room and I tell you, I enter a room that I don't know and I'm looking for the exits. It's automatic, it happens, right? But I remove myself from the anxiety. When I look for the exits today at a new situation, I tell myself, you know where the exits are and you're okay. You're gonna have a good time. And I pull myself out. And then if the anxiety comes back later on, I just tell myself the same message. The anxiety you have to challenge. You have to challenge the anxiety. Because anxiety really has this like gift of taking a small bit of truth and making it crazy. So if I can acknowledge that there is that small possibility, but that's where my faith comes in, and the universe / God, that things are going to happen the way they're supposed to happen. So if there's some unfortunate tragedy that's supposed to come my way, I don't really have much control in stopping that. I mean, that doesn't mean I can be reckless and not, live my life in a relatively safe manner. I mean, doesn't give me free carte blanche to do crazy things, right? I still need to be responsible and do my part, but no matter how much I do,